Welcome to Voices Rising, the podcast where real conversations inspire real growth, sharing stories, speaking truth, and rising stronger together. This is a space where women come together across generations, experiences, and seasons of life to share the lessons, challenges, and breakthroughs that shape who we've become. Well, tonight you have Marcia Gorbetti, my co-host. My name is Lynda Rose, and we're going to dive into some honest conversations about leadership, confidence, purpose, business, and what it really takes to keep rising, even when life doesn't go as planned. Because every woman has a story, every woman has strength, and every voice deserves to be heard. I am so excited for you to meet this amazing woman that I had the privilege of working alongside, but now get to call a really dear friend. And her name is Dee Diaz. And I want to share with you a little bit about her story, because she is definitely a purpose-driven leader with nearly 30 years of experience in philanthropy, social impact, and organizational leadership. Throughout her career, she has helped organizations and communities thrive by fostering cultures grounded in curiosity, agility, mentorship, and collaboration. As former CEO of Look Good, Feel Better, a national cancer charity, and through senior leadership roles with UNICEF Canada, War Child Canada, and SickKids Foundation, Dee has transformed and championed transformational fundraising and community impact initiatives with a particular focus on improving outcomes for women and children. And I can tell you that she made a huge difference for the women that I knew that were affected. Health and wellness have shaped both Dee's personal and professional journey. In 2013, she was diagnosed with a rare degenerative neurospinal condition. After stepping down from executive leadership in 2025 to prioritize her health and mobility, she transitioned into consulting, where she now serves as a social impact strategist and advisor to organizations including the Toronto Foundation, Canadian Women's Foundation, and Fighting Blindness Canada. Today, Dee partners with nonprofit leaders to strengthen strategy, fundraising, governance, and organizational effectiveness. She is particularly passionate about mentoring women to find and strengthen their leadership voice, regardless of where they are in their career journey. Outside of work, Dee is a proud aunt, or a tita in Filipino, to two remarkable nieces that I know you spoil endlessly. She enjoys travel, culinary adventures. She chooses the best restaurants ever, always, community volunteering, and spending time at her cottage in Prince Edward County. So please welcome my very dear friend and the amazing Dee Diaz. So Dee, it's so great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I don't even know where to start with you, because I certainly met you when you were leading Look Good, Feel Better, and of course was involved with that organization for many years. But I think let's start maybe at the beginning, because what maybe people don't realize is maybe just tell us a little bit about that first interview and what your first impressions were when you entered into that room.
Absolutely. First of all, I was so excited to be talking to Look Good, Feel Better and understanding, their scope and scale and the mission, which was really meaningful to me. Half of the women in my family have been impacted by cancer, so it was very personal. But when I entered that room, what struck me the most was sitting across from five men and talking about a women's organization. And I recall going through that process and them asking me questions, really great questions. And then they gave me an example and said, "What do you think holds us back?" And I couldn't help myself. And I said, "Well, I'm going to be really honest because it's the type of leader I am. And if it's not something for you, I absolutely understand. But I would hazard a guess that part of the challenge and part of the problem that we could solve is having more women at the table." My exact words, "I think the five of you," which of course triggered a little bit of like, wow, that's pretty bold to say that. But I just thought there was a disconnect for me, how five men, and that's not to say they don't bring their own talent and expertise, but not to have them at the table evaluating who the next leader is for an organization, first and foremost for women, seemed very disconnected to me. And so, I really respected their response, which was, you know, why would you say that? And for me, I just said, there are a lot of insights about women that as much as women or as much as men would like to think they understand, they really don't.
Mhm.
And the number one reason I gave them is that everything that you've talked to me about at this point is about how do we bring more women through to the workshop? And I said, that's not actually the question. to me, the question was, how do we get women to choose themselves first? Because what we learned is that, at least I would think so at that time. I mean, I know more now, but at the time, I would think as women, even in a diagnosis, I don't think we choose ourselves first. We choose our kids, our partners, our jobs, parents we take care of. So, how does that work if women don't choose themselves first? They barely take a shower, barely eat. So, and then you're going to ask them that in the middle of diagnosis and treatment that they need to go to a 3-hour workshop. It wouldn't be the top of my priority list, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
I find that so indicative, Dee, of the whole greater picture of women's health and the amount of money that is not spent on women. And I think, Lynda, I think it was you that just posted something today on Facebook that was how much is spent on, men's seemingly trivial things as opposed to women's health. And that just seemed to just paint the picture right there of what you said. I find it just shocking there was no men on that board.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, well, there was women on the board, they just weren't at that table evaluating me. And then when I joined, I found out that there had never been a female chair. So that astonished me. And so for me, it wasn't about challenging the men. It was whether or not I could see them as allies in what I believe could be change management to ensure that the future was as inclusive and diverse and accessible and relevant to all the things that were key to that organization's mission. And so what I did find, and even though at first the story is, of course, you point that out, but then you realize that here are men who are passionate about look good, feel better. I mean, many of them had been with the organization for 20 plus years in some capacity as a volunteer or as a board member. So that said something to me is that they fundamentally cared. So now the question is, do they care enough to determine what does change look like and how do they either help champion that or step out of the way to make room for that to happen? And I have to say I was pretty pleased. Part of that conversation was, if I'm joining you, then here are two things I know I want absolutely. One is love to see a female chair, love to see parity on the board. Because at that time, I think it was at maybe 25-30% of women. And I said, and how do we make space for those voices? And so that was really key to me. And, I was pleasantly surprised. They said yes, and it made sense to them. It was for them, many of them, an aha moment. And I really respected that.
Yeah. And you did an
Yeah.
extraordinary job with the board and with the vision and the strategy of where Look Good Feel Better was heading. But what I don't think a lot of people understand, and maybe you can talk about what type of leadership you had to evolve into, or most of us are in leadership roles. I was in a leadership role that I had employees that work for me, that were my stakeholders, that got paid from 9 to 5, knew what they had to do. You had a very small staff.
Mhm.
Not only did you have to rely on the goodwill and the volunteers of the board to hope that they would participate, that hope that they would play ball with you, then you had to rely on the volunteers, which made up a huge amount of the workshops and what we did at Look Good Feel Better. And then you had to rely on the generosity of people to support your mission. So
Mhm.
when people don't understand that in nonprofit, how much is built on the ability of you to develop relationships. Can you maybe talk about how leadership is very different for people in the nonprofit sector? Because it's not the same as having, I mean, I think you had a staff of 20, 10 to 15, 10 to 20 at the time. But that was a very small portion of what you had to do to get the job done.
Absolutely. I always think not for profits, we do with so little, but we do so much. And so for me, what became really critical is always hiring the right people. There's something to be said, for all the background and acumen somebody can have. To me, they're the soft skills that really where people can lean in. I will say the not-for-profit sector is not for the faint of heart. If you're used to, and I'd interview people who came from private sector and would say, "Oh, I'm used to lean budgets." And I'm like, so when we talk about lean budgets, we're talking about Google grants and donated space. It's very different. Um, and so leaning into that leadership where you're really having to build the right relationships and inspire people to get involved. here's the thing about charity. No one has to do it. You don't have to donate. I mean, you want to donate, and you have to be able to mobilize that feeling of, thinking about yourself in that particular situation or understanding the great good it can do in the community and how many people might be impacted. Quite frankly, in all of the organizations I've worked for, oftentimes there are a lot of silent aspects of our mission that people don't get to see and hear and feel. And so, how do we ensure that we can inspire them to get engaged? Oftentimes, that's through storytelling. It's about bringing them into what is happening. And so, what was important to me at the beginning with the board was really to get them inside of Look Good, Feel Better to understand the scope of the work. Because I think for too long, the focus was on, well, we give a 3-hour free workshop, but free doesn't mean anything to anybody who doesn't have time.
Yeah.
Right? And then when we talk about the volunteers, what do we understand about the volunteers? Why do they dedicate their time every month or every week to join us? Oftentimes it was very personal. They have been through, their own cancer diagnosis, and now they want to give back. And when you understand that about people, and being able to bridge that empathy to them being able to tangibly give back, it's very powerful. But you have to want people to lean in with you. So from my perspective, my leadership has not been about, leading from some ivory tower and telling everybody what we should and could do. For me, it was always about how do I get in there and be part of it and have them join me and see that I wasn't just asking them, for donations or their time, but I was giving as much as I was asking for. So to me, it's, reciprocal. And that to me is what you create meaning. And I think when we think about the charities that we're most connected to, it's often those organizations that make you feel that.
Yeah.
And that to me is the key to it all.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
know, we get asked so often for so many different charities, because everybody is such huge need. But I know for myself, I pick the ones that are closest to my heart. What are the things that have happened in my family? So that's where my money goes because it was so close and personal. Do
Absolutely.
you see? I mean, it's amazing that you obviously are a very special person to be able to do that, Dee, as Lynda has always told me when she talks about you. But do you see anything changing now with people and what they can give with the state of the economy, or is there still that connection that runs through people, the volunteers, that no matter what they're going to give, or the people that give their time and their money?
There'll always be people who are willing to give their time and their money, and it's something that they grew up as values in their world from very early on. And we can see that because when you talk to some volunteers, they'll talk about, oh, when they were a kid, they brought the UNICEF collection box, right? Like, so they learn very early on how giving back really means something, and how we can all play a role in that. But it is changing. So here's what I would say is changing in the charitable sector. One is, with the economy the way it is, people do have less, but that doesn't stop them from giving. So while the donations might be down in terms of the value, the amount of people who are giving is still there. So that's great. They might be just paring back. So that's important. Two, we need to get people back into volunteerism. Unfortunately, post-pandemic, we did see people retreat because, for 3 years, we really weren't in the community. And to get them back involved, it almost felt like we had to kind of re-engage, re-inspire, and remind people of just how valuable, civic duty is and volunteerism is, and how, to be honest, part of it is not just giving back to the community, but social connections are part of us being a healthy, community and humans. So when we look at that and understand that, you know, connecting to your neighbors, connecting to your local hospital, to your food bank, all matters. So what I want is that people not to look at it as, oh, I'm just giving my time, but actually you get so much back from beyond time. And so I think we are seeing a different phase, but we're also seeing that people want to give in different ways. So once upon a time, I would say a lot of people would just give, a donation. their annual donation. But what has shifted is that people are starting to think more creatively in how they give. So it could be everything from their time. It could be, that they're collecting food or they're running special events for somebody in their community. Maybe they're helping drive somebody to an appointment. So I think there are a variety of ways that people can give, and we just have to harness that and understand that it's all still part of being charitable and it all matters. And so we can all participate, whether, we have a job, don't have a job, are struggling, financially, we all have the capacity to give.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about, because the one thing I watched you do was having to pivot. You had to pivot a lot. We had to pivot when we had money. There was times when we didn't have money, and then COVID arrived. And your whole business model was based on in-person workshops. And then we couldn't do the big gala that we did to raise all the money that we did every year. We don't have to go into the details of that, but talk to me as a leader. If you were talking to women about the importance of being able to pivot as a leader, and what were some of the leadership things that you had to adapt to, and maybe you could give advice to women leaders on the importance of being able to pivot.
As leaders, we spend an inordinate amount of time with our boards thinking about strategic plans, annual plans. But the one thing we don't spend enough time is on agility and understanding just how, we need to try different things. I think sometimes when we try something, we believe that it has to be, okay, for the next year, this is what we're doing. But sometimes you can try something for a month, 2 months, right? I think I'm always encouraging my teams and those I mentor to talk about, piloting things allows you to just try and see where it works and where it doesn't. Talking to other people and other organizations in terms of what they may have done in terms of pivoting or adapting into a different climate or different events, that's all valuable. And I don't think we take enough time to talk to our networks. So I'm really fortunate. I have a group of 14 women CEOs who we've been connecting for the last 5 years, I would say. And we get the opportunity to really bounce ideas off one another. So if there's any piece of advice I would give women, it's that, make the time to connect to other women leaders because it is so invaluable because they have a different perspective. They may have experienced something different from you, and they give you the confidence to take a leap of faith when you're feeling unsure. And it's so meaningful, right? I mean, I love when we could just bring something to the table and some people will be like, "Oh, don't do that." Right? And that's great. Like to have that honesty and that ability to connect and trust people in your circle is really powerful. And I love that. And I think if I go back to that mindset of having to pivot so much during the pandemic, it was also being surrounded by not only board members, but donors and volunteers who literally would call or email and say, Dee, what can I do? And to me, I never take for granted the fact that those around me wanted to see Look Good, Feel Better succeed.
Yeah.
Right? So in their mind, it was like, not on my watch. What can I do? How do I have to raise my voice to support you amidst everything else? And so that was so it's powerful. Like it reminds me of the power of community when we can all just even ask one another, are you okay? What do you need? And how can I help?
Yeah, and I remember, well, being the very proud chair during that time, but we didn't really skip a beat, and I kept saying to the board, "It's because of the relationships that you have built over the years that people trust you, and they weren't gonna let you go, and they weren't gonna let Look Good, Feel Better go." There was such an investment. But I really wanna touch on that comment about, I could see Marcia going, because Marcia is the entrepreneur in our group, and she says this to me all the time, it drives me crazy. I used to wake up in the morning and I would just have to do what I needed to do to make my paycheck, right? And that's what you would do, right? Whereas in corporate,
Yeah.
you tend to get very stuck into the strategic and I think that's really important. But I think when you talked about women, if I could say anything to our listeners, women will help women if you ask.
And
Absolutely.
that does not happen in the male community. They don't sit around a table and bounce ideas off one another. Very rare. It's very rare. But, the group of women that I got together with last week, they were all former competitors in the direct selling industry. And we still share stories and we still share examples. And
Mm,
I just think you really touched on that. Marcia, you probably want to comment on this too, but it's just the importance of women in your network and connecting.
yeah,
It's so
absolutely. It's huge, huge. Women connecting with other women, can just absolutely move mountains because there's not that competitiveness. There's this sense women want to work together. I mean, that's always sort of been the history of women working together to get things done.
yeah.
well, and I think the competitiveness, while it might always exist, I mean, I sit around the table with 14 other, CEOs from the charitable sector. In some ways, we're competitive, but at the same token, we believe so strongly in the sector and what we're doing for the community that when we can come together, we know it matters. And it is a very unique position and opportunity when you can really just trust people, and understanding, where they're coming from, and understanding that we bring a whole wealth of background and experience that we won't ever all get to. So why not lean on other people who may have gone through it, and be okay to ask for help? I think that's the hardest thing I've had to learn in my own career is asking for help. And this group, and I wish I had learned it when I was 25 in my early part of my career.
I was just going to ask you, what's the one lesson you wish you learned earlier? Here, okay.
Yes, it's really asking for help, and it's hard, and it's hard professionally, and it's hard personally. And so, for me, understanding now that I have these people that I can ask questions, and even, I mean, sometimes the questions people will be saying, I don't want to ask this stupid question, but I really don't know the answer. And it's like, but there shouldn't be a stupid question. It should be, let's just ask the question, right? And then we find out it leads into so many other things that we didn't even think about. And that's so incredible. And so, yes, asking for help, hardest thing, still hard, but getting better.
Yes, you have gotten better. And I think let's talk a little bit about the challenge you had when you got the diagnosis
Mhm.
with your back and the degenerative disease that you had going on because I saw you go through surgeries, and I remember you always wanting to be there, and we'd have to say, "No, you're gonna go rest now," and I could see over the years where you started to really listen, and you went, "I'm listening to my body, I'm going to do what I need to do." Maybe just take us through that journey of having to deal with that, and how did you have to adjust, and certainly giving people hope, because to me, you're such an inspiration. Not only are you an amazing leader, but you also had other things that you had to deal with that not everybody had to deal with.
It was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to go through in my life, to be diagnosed. I had to have emergency surgery, and when I woke up, I had no feeling in my left leg, and I was told there was no guarantee that I would have any mobility. So I was in a rehab facility for over a month, and they said, "Do whatever you get back in 6 months is all you're going to get." And I just, in my mind, this was just not possible. I had so much more to do. And I'm such an independent person too. So to think about having to create this system of like dependency, just even just driving on my own whenever I wanted to drive, just felt like I don't want to do that. And so it really became, kind of the amplifier for me to be like, whatever it takes, I have to do it. If I have to do rehab every week, 3 times a week, I will do it. So that was really hard. And then having been defined by my career, my job for so long, I was struggling with that piece, right? Because I couldn't put into it what I used to be able to do. And so that I really had to find a way to navigate between my identity as myself as a leader in a career and myself as a woman with, complicated health and my family relying on me and knowing that I really galvanize the people in my world. And so to not be that person was really difficult. And so I think for me, what I really had to think about was how do I not be defined by it? And how do I have gratitude for what I do have? Because I was in a facility watching individuals who had had strokes and traumatic brain injuries. And I had so much more than they did at that point, and I was feeling sorry for myself. And I realized this is not the direction I need to be heading in. And what I had learned from Look Good Feel Better, all the research tells you that optimism plays a role in better health outcomes. So I said, how can I be at this organization and not take any of the attributes of this organization, which is optimism, self-care, self-advocacy? In some ways, I really truly believe I landed at Look Good Feel Better for a reason. And that reason was because it became a little bit of my own personal compass. And even though I wasn't facing cancer, I was facing something that was going to be a lifelong condition and chronic pain. And how do I navigate through that? So for me, it was really about embracing the values of a mission that I was passionate about, and almost reflecting it back onto myself so I could also, survive and thrive, really.
Yeah. And you've done that.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know several people, Dee, with chronic pain. How do you have any tips or anything about how you deal with that on a daily basis? Is it a constant, talking to yourself in the mirror? Do you have anything that you do physically to help you through that?
Absolutely. So I do give myself a little moment to wallow in it because sometimes I think, to be constantly optimistic is not realistic, at least for me. And so I need a moment. Sometimes it's a couple of hours, sometimes it's half a day, or sometimes I say to my partner, today is one of those days I am not moving from my bed. And that's okay. And I'm going to be okay with it, and we will figure it out tomorrow. And I take it one step at a time, because sometimes when I start thinking about all the things I want to do, it's actually what overwhelms me because I think about what I can't do, what the impact will be on other people, how it will make me feel guilty, all the things. And so I've had to really try to find a way to reconcile all of those feelings and understand that, sometimes the best thing I can do for everybody around me, and most importantly for myself, is to just stand still and be okay, and I will find my way out of that moment because at least in my world, my pain is not every day or every moment. It's episodic. Sometimes there are longer episodes than others, but I know that there's another side. I will get there, and I just need to let my body and my brain, and sometimes my heart, just breathe a little bit, and I can find the other side and navigate through, my days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. How
Mhm.
did you reconcile, with, because you had to make a pretty serious decision this last year when you
Mhm.
said, okay, it's time that I need to step away from a 5 day a week job. Well, let's be honest, you've never worked 40 hours in your life. You were always working more. And you made that decision to do that for your health. And then you made the brave decision to go into consulting.
Mhm.
Talk to the audience a bit about that bravery of making that decision and making that transition.
So, one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, like I said to you earlier, I was so defined by my career, my job. I was so proud to be a, leader and to be part of a sector that does so much great things. Um, and so I realized something probably halfway through, being at the midpoint of 10 years of understanding that, I could feel myself slowing down, and I could feel myself asking a lot from the people around me. And even though they were so gracious at saying, do whatever you need, the level of guilt that I would have, and that's something I have to just reconcile for my own brain because that was me. That wasn't anybody else putting that guilt or that pressure. But I always felt that I was starting to ask the people, especially the leaders who I really respected around me. I kept having to ask for backup plans to the backup plans because I was always so worried that here's our event. So, what happens if I'm having a bad back day? What happens if pain is unmanageable? What if I can't get somewhere? So in my mind, as somebody who does worst case scenario planning constantly, to have plan, you know, J to Z just felt like this is unreasonable. And so I realized part of that was the pressure I was putting on myself and how much stress that was causing on my body. And I just realized that if I thought about all the things that really mattered to me, and it's not that my job didn't matter to me, but my family needed to come first, right? No one was going to be at the end of my, life be all about my job. It was going to be about what did I give back to my family, my community, my partner, and my nieces that I adore. And I just couldn't fathom continuing to essentially erode my body in ways that made it more dysfunctional and unreliable. So I had to just say, what matters more to me? And, just choosing life in the ways I wanted to continue to live life was what I chose. And I thought to myself, I can't wait till I'm 60 or 65 to retire. And what if my mobility is not great then? So I can't travel, right? And I just thought of all those moments. And I thought, if I've been given the choice, especially since when I was first diagnosed, there was a world that I was not going to have any mobility. I felt like what a squandered moment if I hadn't taken the chance to say no. And some might say it's brave, but for me, it was more of a necessity um, because it just was what the world was telling me. And I believe in listening to the world. I believe in listening to my body. And I just said, okay, I've got to make this tough decision and we'll figure it out. And I had to believe that whatever was meant for me and whatever this decision would evolve, it would happen. And so, I'm really fortunate to be able to transition to this role and being a consultant and still use my great brain to kind of foster impact in the community. So it's a lot of change and transition, but it's been one that I welcome because it's given me balance for my body.
Yeah. So you do a lot of mentoring. I know that you mentor a lot of people in your industry and in the nonprofit. If no one was listening and you could just kind of speak from the heart, what is the thing that drives you crazy that you want to shake these people and say, listen to me, trust me on this? You're a common denominator that you see in your mentoring.
Yes, and it's one that, it's interesting because I think it's a little bit polarizing, and I struggle with the concept of imposter syndrome. And so when women talk to me about feeling imposter syndrome, one, I don't ever hear men talk about imposter syndrome, which is part of the I
Ironic,
thought to myself.
right?
I think about the fact that, I've seen a lot of resumes come through my desk and I watch men who are underqualified, have no business being in this role, but they apply for it. And I will work with a lot of women who will not apply despite being exceptionally talented, having the skill set, probably overqualified, but they underestimate it. And it's this notion that, you know, in my mind, it's even if you're not perfect or great at it, why are we not trying? Why are we not saying we're going to step in, lean in, as opposed to, is it really the right thing for me? Or
Yeah.
can I do it? Like, I feel like we ask the wrong questions. And it comes from a place of um in some ways we're so thoughtful of everybody around us and wanting to feel that we understand, oh, okay, where do I fit in all of this? But I don't know, I feel like as women sometimes we just need to take a little bit more leap of faith in our confidence. And part of learning is also failing. And that's okay. And I think that's where imposter syndrome is kind of bloom from, is the fact that people think that failure is bad. But I think we've learned a lot from things that haven't gone perfectly or the way we wanted.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I embrace that. I think that there's something really beautiful in learning from the things that are not perfect.
Yeah. I recently read that a man will apply for a job even if he has only 20% of the qualifications.
Oh, yes.
He don't have to
Yes.
think twice about it, right?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. I've seen, applicants of people who just graduated applying for vice president roles. I'm like, okay, like that's like, wow, okay. There's imposter syndrome, and then,
There's
there's this
delusion.
reality. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness, that's hysterical. But it's
Dee,
so
what would you oh, sorry,
no,
Lynda.
I'm just it's just so true what she said.
Um, What would you say would be one of the best qualities? Because you don't often come across people that say, I want to work in the nonprofit sector, or, what would be some of the qualifications that you would look for, or what would you advise any young person that thought they wanted to get into that sector? Just talk a little bit about that if you could.
For me, it will always come down first and foremost to relationships. People give to people, right? So don't get me wrong, there are incredible missions and charities out there, but ultimately we give to people. When you feel connected to people, when they tell the right stories, when they make you feel good about what you're doing, and then they inspire you. That's how we give. That's the heart part of all of the sector, is how do we engage with people, number one. Number two, there has to be this sense of curiosity and wanting to understand, why does it all matter, and how can I be creatively sharing this with people? I mean, when you're part of an organization, one that's been a long time around, with like Look Good Feel Better for 30 plus years, and it's the same workshop, but the reality is, although it's the same workshop, so many different people who walk through the doors of organizations, and how we help them, and why it matters, right? I mean, Linda, you and I, we've seen stories of 16-year-olds with their parents who've gone through cancer, right? We've seen grandparents, and we've seen generations going through very similar diagnosis and treatment. And so, to me, it's like reminding people that behind all of, what you see of the organization and its marketing materials, are people that we're impacting, and they're the ones that matter. It's their story. It's the fact that they even lend their story to us, and show the world what's possible with support, and to share their vulnerability. I feel like that is a privilege, to steward those stories, to ignite and inspire the community to get involved. So, somebody wants to be in fundraising, you've got to be pretty passionate about it, and not from a theoretical perspective, because listen, philanthropy and charitable sector, it's a business. There's no doubt about it. But there is a part of it that has high empathy and high EQ that is required, to connect, and to inspire people to be engaged in whatever capacity that looks like. And the last thing I would say is that you have to want to be a voice. And, sometimes we don't even realize how powerful our own voices are in an organization and in charity, and understanding that you play a role. So for me, since the very early days of my career, I really thought it was important for me to always add the piece of me that was important to why I was there. So what's my reason? What's my purpose? And while I will always love whatever mission I'm part of, I needed that connection for me. And so whether it be, I love children, and that's why I started my career at SickKids. I had family members who experienced cancer. I understood what it meant to have family, across the world, in the Philippines, not having access to basic medical care and vaccines. For me, that was the tangibility of amplifying my impact. And so I encourage anybody who wants to do this work to think about those aspects, and how they can take all of that and bring it to somewhere that can really, kind of benefit from all of that impact and possibility.
Yeah, great. So the $1 million question we get asked all the time: do you think women can have it all?
Well, from one of my favorite mentors, she will always say, "You can have it all, just not all at the same time."
Mm.
And this person, Sharon Avery, she says that all the time to me, and she reminds me that it's true, we can. It's just a matter of timing, right? And you choose that. And sometimes we need to be okay of when that happens, what sequence. And I think, as this next generation, sometimes I do feel bad for them, because there's this expectation of everything all the time. And I think that's obviously perpetuated by social media, and there's no time for your brain to breathe.
Yeah. All instant gratification, right?
Always, right?
Yeah.
And so you think to yourself, what can we be doing to just add breathability? And it's interesting when people ask me questions about, hey, Dee, what do you think innovation is? And I'm like, how about back to basics? right? Simple things. Breathe, right? Say thank you. Take the time to really say thank you and have gratitude. You know, really think about what matters to you, not what you think should matter to you or what the expectations of others are, but what really matters to you. And if we go back to those basics, I think we'd be a stronger society and community. And that's where I think the charitable sector really could play a role in reminding people that, what we do is important. And how do we get everybody to join us? Quite frankly, I've said this a million times, Lynda. If we all gave 1%, companies and
Yeah.
individuals, we actually wouldn't need any charities.
Right.
Right? So it's just a reminder that it does take a village. And sometimes I worry that we're in a society where the same people keep giving and they tend to give a lot and we rely on those individuals. But I think we all have the capacity to give
Yeah.
and in whatever way that is. And we just have to lean in and do that.
Yeah. That is such a great message. And when you think about that, just 1%, if everybody gave 1%, to the charity that means the most to you, it could mean a huge thing. I read this a long time ago, and the measure of a person, because you talked about that, this instant gratification is, how is a person when they've had lost luggage, tangled Christmas lights, and
Yes.
put away your shopping cart when no one's looking, right? Like all of those things. And I think that's so important. But, we're going to wrap up real quick here. But, you know, talk to me about maybe the final closing of how does Dee Diaz find balance, and where have you really learned how to have your voice rise and have it of importance?
Well, I think first it has to start with yourself. And that's been a hard lesson for me to realize that I do have a voice and I need to listen to it myself, not only share it with others, but understand that I have to listen to when I know that my body or my brain is saying, okay, you need to pause. Um, and to trust my gut. I mean, listen, I trust my gut a lot. I will say that.
Yeah.
Um, but sometimes I second guess it because I feel that there's expectations around me and I kind of waver a little bit, but then I need to remind myself, trust your gut. Like when I said I had to put a boundary with work, I had to trust my gut, right? And I have to believe that everything happens for a reason. And I know some people think that's really cliche, but I've lived my life on those terms and I've landed in the places I have needed to land. And so I think it's really important that we just keep listening to our own voice and then also sharing your voice with others. So mentorship, I love mentoring others and I love sharing, what's possible, sharing my own experiences, whether they were great or bad, or, an opportunity to learn something, imagining about what I could have done differently. I mean, we all have these conversations like, oh, what if only I did this, right? And to share it with somebody to be a reminder of like, don't have those regrets of what I could have done. And so I even think about my health. I don't want regrets. So stepping away, it started off as feeling like a regret, but as more time has gone on, I've realized what a tremendous gift that is. And so to me, what I've learned through this entire journey is the fine line of perspective between what feels like grief and what is joy.
Mhm.
And you just need to get on the other side because otherwise like you can stay in grief for a long time,
Yep.
right? And I think about my own body grief, like all the things I can't do or shouldn't do, and I can grieve that forever, right? I could think about what I don't have, but it's like I just have to shift that perspective on some days and be like, yes, but I can do this
Yeah.
and that's okay. And even though, yes, I can't play on volleyball leagues anymore, but I can watch, I can support, I can, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
My niece is into volleyball. I can encourage her to go for it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
to me, it's that fine line of perspective. And sometimes we don't take the moment to breathe a little bit to find that perspective, and it's an important thing.
Oh my God, that was brilliant. That
Yes.
fine line between grief
Grief and joy.
and joy. So it's like that thing, when you look at a tombstone, it's the dash, right? What do you do with the dash?
Yes. Yeah.
And how do you manage your life?
Mhm.
Marcia, do you want any final thoughts before I wrap up?
No, I think that's the perfect place to wrap up. You've just been amazing, Dee.
Oh,
So
thank you.
much to learn from you.
Yeah, when I describe this person, this human being that I'm so blessed to have now as my buddy, that we love to go shopping and we love to go out and eat, you just bring such peace and such
Yeah.
joy because you are so centered. And yes, your ability as a leader is, you know, there's no question on how strong that is. But what was overwhelming for me tonight to hear was how this positive attitude and the balance and how you approach life has just made everything so much better. So thank you so much for being on here. I mean, I love you. You know, I love you. You're just such an amazing human being that gives everybody so much hope and so much inspiration and just such a great reminder for our viewers to have the right attitude. And with that, we can achieve
Oh,
everything. So
well,
thank you, Dee.
well, thank you for asking me to share my voice. It means a lot. And I couldn't have asked for a better and safe place to do that with. So thank you.
Yes. And to all of our viewers, thank you. Thank you for watching us. You know that you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram. You can certainly go to our website at voicesrisingpodcast.com. And just, the biggest compliment you can give is by following us and listening to our great guests that we have. And just know that as a woman, as a person, everybody deserves to have their voice rise. So have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful evening wherever you are, whatever time of day you're watching this. But just know that you deserve to have your voice being heard. So thank you.